Greetings, Wilkinson here. Today, my guest is Daniel Stewart. We're in Palm Springs. Say hi to everybody, Daniel.
Hey there.
There he is. We're trying to figure out where we met, and we can't figure it out. I know I photographed him. What was it, last year I photographed you, or what?
A year or two ago, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay, that was fun. So he's a nice-looking daddy type. Is that okay if I say you're a daddy type?
Sure.
Okay. Is that an insult?
No, I've always wanted to be older.
Really? You're not.
Youth is overrated.
You're like, what, 28?
Just turned 50.
Whoa.
Yeah.
You look good for 50.
Oh, shucks.
And when I met him out, I don't know, a week or two ago, I said, wow, you've lost weight. His face is like really thin and nice looking. Very good.
Yeah, like I told you, it's this job I've got.
I approve.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
All right, let's dig in. So you're gay.
I am gay, yeah.
All right. How'd that happen? Tell me your story.
Oh, all right.
Wherever you want to start.
Okay, let's see.
And when we started we talk a little before we do these, but you didn't say where you grew up. So start with that. Tell you a little about your family and what happened.
Sure, okay. So I was born and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm the middle child of my original family. And let's see, raised in an extremely religious household. My dad and his two brothers run what is now a chain of mortuaries in the Albuquerque area, and they're considered to be pillars of their Christian community there. And let's see, as far as the gay part goes, I was raised in the church. I'm one of those people that believed all of it. I'm pretty susceptible to other people's opinions and ideas. That's just part of my personality. So as a kid, everything that I was taught about Christianity and the church and the Bible, I believed it 100%. And I was taught that to question it was also wrong. So I did not question any of it. I believed all of it. And
it has built-in guardrails to keep you from thinking and exploring.
Pretty much, yeah. When you're taught that to ask why is wrong, and again, when you're not someone who's really great at thinking for themselves, it was like a perfect storm for me. I think if I hadn't eventually realized that I was queer, I probably would have continued on in the church. I would have gone to seminary and become a youth minister or something like that, because I loved the church as a kid. It was everything to me. One of the big bullet points of my early life is my mother passed away when I was 6. She died from breast cancer. And the way it was handled in my family, in fact, it's something I'm still dealing with in therapy today, is my dad just said, God took your mother to heaven. It's not our place to question why. It's part of his plan that's been in place since before any of us were even alive. And so it's just our job to keep marching forward as good Christian soldiers. And
did that have the effect of making you stuff your feelings and all that, or what?
I'm sure it did. He also told me that she was now in heaven and she was at the side of Jesus, and both of them were always watching everything I did. And again, I just believed all of it. And I think it made me a massive mess that continues in some ways to this day. But anyway, and then as puberty hit, one of the things I always joke about is I thought it was interesting. I would hear in church, they would talk about that the sin of lust in man's heart it just was talked about a lot. And it was talked about in ways that it seemed like every man struggles with lust in his heart, over lust for women. And I remember before I realized I was gay, thinking like, I don't know what this is. And I just feel really blessed that I'm not cursed with this sin of lust over women. And then when I figured out that I was queer, which actually happened, it's funny, I started stealing porno magazines from one of the local bookstores. I was stealing like Honcho and Skinflix. And after, I don't know the period of time that I was doing that, but I remember I was looking at a Honcho with Donnie Russo on the cover. I was probably looking at Donnie Russo, and it hit me like a bolt of lightning. I was like, holy shit, like I'm gay. This means I'm gay. And
oh, really?
Yeah, it's funny to think that you'd be stealing gay porno magazines and not know that you were gay, but it took me a minute. I'm a slow learner. Anyway, and so everything started to fall apart at that point. I went to my minister and I went to my youth pastor and I never talked with my dad about it, but I went to other religious leaders and asked for help. And I said that I was asking God to take this thing away and it wasn't happening. And just over and over, I was told, like, you must not have faith. If you're praying and asking for something and it's not happening, you must not have faith around it. And I was really confused because I really wanted it to go away. And so I spent a couple years, maybe a few years in this cycle of begging to have this changed and it not changing. I guess it would have been probably from the time I was 13 until I think I gave up around 18. And something happened. I used to hang out at the cruise areas in Albuquerque. That was where I would have my sexual hookups or whatever. So I was like 16 years old running around in the mountains underneath the tram and hooking up with 60-year-old men. One tiny little story, the very first time that I hooked up with a man, I was actually living in Panama City that summer. I went down there with a friend of the family's, and this older fella picked me up from the park late at night. I was out skateboarding, and he asked if I wanted to go watch a dirty movie at his place. So I was like, sure. And I remember we rode out to his place. He lived on the beach, and I remember the whole way over being terrified that he would find out that I was a virgin. And I had this thought, if this guy finds out I'm a virgin, he's going to throw me out of his car. He's going to be like so pissed. During those times, I also remember.
So you went to the house?
So I went to the house. We hooked up.
Don't leave us hanging.
That's fair. That's the most exciting part of this.
Or what? Okay.
He put on Other Side of Aspen. I don't know if it was one or two, and then, we had sex and I was totally freaked out and I went to take a shower and I remember breaking the shower head off and being freaked out that it was just like not a great experience. I was looking for it. Like I was excited by it. And then let's see.
So virgin no more?
Virgin no more, although, and then I remember during that time thinking or wondering or not even wondering, just thinking that the only way gay people interacted was at cruise areas, like with anonymous sex. And at a certain point, I realized, I think I found some of the local magazines that had, there was one in Albuquerque and it was very gay friendly, like a Free Rag or whatever.
Right.
And I realized that gay people hung out in ways that weren't out at cruise areas or whatever. Let's see. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit.
That's fine.
But at a certain point, I met a guy at one of the cruise areas. His name was Jeff. I will not use his last name. And we connected and went on like a date of sorts and hooked up. And I had this big crush on him. He drove a red Jeep with a Bad Boy Club sticker on the windshield. And I just thought he was like the hottest thing, and he was muscly. So we really went on one single date. And then I guess shortly after that, we started hanging out, and he and a friend of his that he had over, the long and short of it is they tried to sexually assault me, and I freaked out and fought my way out of that situation. I ended up like kicking him in the face and getting out of there. And I remember he seemed really angry. He was like chasing me down and threatening me or whatever. And then shortly after that, my dad apparently received a phone call from someone, and this guy Jeff outed me to my dad. He did it in a really strange way. He said that I was hanging out with his son and that I was molesting his son and I needed to stay away from him or whatever. And I've always liked older men, always. So I just knew immediately who it was. It was like, I'm not into young guys. That couldn't possibly be me. And so my dad quoted scripture and asked me to basically remove myself from the home and from the family. And so
he kicked you out.
Yeah, he did. And
what did your siblings think of that?
It's hard to know. By that point, my dad had remarried a woman who was also a widower. In fact, my dad had met my stepmother at her husband's funeral. They didn't hook up there, but that's where they first crossed paths. And anyway, it's hard to know what the siblings thought because we were a mess of a family at that point. We were this mixed family and everyone was having their own issues and problems. And I never really knew what my siblings thought of it, but I left.
Was your stepmother okay with it, or was she not involved at all?
Interesting. She was not involved. later on, I realized that she didn't have any problem with me being gay. In fact, her and her whole family, so my new extended family on her side, none of them have ever had any issue with it. It's my blood family, all of them, uncles, aunts, cousins, everybody. They all have issues with me being gay, so I don't have any relationship with them. But my stepmother, I realized later, had no problem with it. But also, this was just all my dad. So I left the home and I was homeless for a little bit. I was staying for a while with this trans prostitute in Albuquerque. Her name was Val. She's passed on since. But Val there were several of us staying at her place, actually. I slept underneath the dining room table. There were guys on the couch. I think there were 3 or 4 of us that were homeless gay.
Why were you under the table? Was it that tight? It was that tight? Or
yeah,
what?
It was a tiny 1-bedroom apartment that all of these people were staying in. So we would sit around playing Sega Genesis all day, and then...
So it was Val's Home for Wayward Boys.
It was Val's Home for Wayward Boys, yeah. It was really her. And during that time, I connected with someone. We started dating. And
you were how old then at this point?
I was 18 then.
Okay.
So... and then at a certain point, his parents got a home with room, and we moved in and ended up living with his parents basically for the rest of our relationship together. I won't go into too many details about that relationship since this is going to be out there, but it wasn't really good for me. And ended up running away. I ran away. I joined the military. I joined the Navy and was only in boot camp for 3 days before they kicked me out because by this point I had discovered pot and I smoked pot constantly, and I was stoned on the plane on the way to boot camp.
Wow.
So I failed my urinalysis immediately. The first thing that they do actually when we got to boot camp is they just march you around a room in circles until you have to pee. So you march around the room. Yeah. You go around the room, you drink from a drinking fountain, and you just keep marching until you have to pee. Once you pee, you're released to whatever you go to next. But that's the first thing they did. On the 3rd day of boot camp, they said, all right, which was a Monday, they said, it's first day of whatever. If I call your name, get your shit, we're throwing you out. And so my name was the first one they called. There were several people, but mine was the first. And I had joined with
Did you not think about any of that, or?
I think I was such a mess.
You're stoned.
Yeah, and I was really broken at this point. I think I was really not thinking things through on any level. And yeah, the reason I had gotten so into weed was it shut my brain off. And yeah, I think I just wasn't going to let go of it until it was ripped out of my hand. So I spent a month they call it a separations division. It was actually it felt like a prison. It was a room full of bunk beds, and we had to stay there, and we had to do labor during the day, and it was weird. And basically it just was, you were biding your time until your paper came to the top of the stack, and then they out-processed you and sent you home. And
where were you when that happened?
I was so during that time I was living in Albuquerque, and then I was shipped off to Chicago to I think it's called the Great Lakes.
Oh, yeah, I
think this or something.
Yeah, my youngest son was there. He was in the Navy. Okay. His graduation thing was there. I forget the name of it, but
yeah, it was Great Lakes something or other. Yep. So they sent me packing back to Albuquerque. I had joined to get away from that relationship, and so all of a sudden I was headed back, and it just wasn't a good scene. So I ran to Florida, and the guy that I was in a relationship with followed me there. His mother called and said, he's on a Greyhound and he's on his way. And I was like, I had just arrived in Florida, and I was just like, oh no. So I picked him up from the Greyhound station and said, you can't be here. You have to go. And so we put him right back on a Greyhound, and then he went right back across the country.
How fun that was. Wow.
It was a weird time for sure. And then let's see. I started going to school. I was a music student for a while at Gulf Coast Community College. So I was a community college music student. I sang in the show choir for my scholarship. Nothing quite like singing in a show choir in Panama City, Florida. Real exciting stuff. But anyway, and then from there, I finished my schooling down in Tampa. And in the middle of my time in Panama City, I moved to San Francisco. I met someone there and moved there. I got really strung out on GHB while I lived there. When I mentioned it earlier to you, you had asked me what it was, and it started out as a bodybuilding supplement. So when I moved to San Francisco, it had just been discovered that this bodybuilding supplement could easily be abused. And so there was a lot of it. My boyfriend was a dealer, and I did a lot of GHB. It's the drug in my life. It's the one drug that I really fell hard in love with and did. When I tell people this who have done it before, when I tell them that I would do, 18 shots of it a day.
Oh, it's a shot.
It was a liquid.
So that kind of shot.
So yeah. When I was at the end, I would do 2 or 3 at a time, and I would do them throughout the day. I couldn't sleep without it. If I didn't have it in my system, I would shake really badly. And
whoa,
it was pretty intense.
Mm-hmm.
And San Francisco was a terrible experience for me because I moved there to be in this relationship with this person that I felt was the love of my life, and I was terribly jealous. I was 20 or 21, and I blew that situation up. It was awful. Back to Florida, finished my school down there, and then I came out to California. The guy that I had been with in San Francisco had moved to Palm Springs, and I moved back. I moved out here with the plans of getting back together with him.
Even though it didn't work out the first time.
Correct. Under the guise of, because I was in love with this guy. Like, I just pined for him after I went back to Florida. Like,
right.
I just was madly in love with this guy.
Was he madly in love with you?
No, he had been, I think, for a minute until he realized what a insane individual I was. Here's a funny little anecdote about my time in San Francisco. So when I moved out there, it was also early days of AOL and the rooms where people would connect and stuff. And he was on AOL, and he showed me, he's like, you can go in here and you can go in these rooms and talk with guys and you can hook up and stuff like that. And I had no idea how any of it worked. I was totally clueless. So he was a bartender. And so while he'd be at work, I would log on under his screen name.
Did they have photos then? I can't remember.
Probably, but I would chat with people,
so
using his login.
Chat. Yeah.
And then at one point, I remember I set something up to hook up with somebody, but I didn't show up. And the guy messaged me and was like, "What the hell happened? Why didn't you show up?" I remember I walked to our apartment one night, and he's, "Hey, I need to explain to you how this stuff works. If you're setting up meetings with people under my name,
don't.
This is what happened. Like, this guy messaged me and asked why I didn't show up, and I had no idea who he was. So I looked back at my history or whatever and saw I don't know how, but."
So he messaged your boyfriend off of AOL?
No, he messaged him on AOL.
But your boyfriend was on AOL when he did
Correct.
That. Okay,
it was basically, I just was clueless. This was real early days of computer stuff. Now it's just so obvious. You don't chat with people with someone else's account.
Right.
If you're trying to keep something a secret. Anyway, but that was the beginning of the end of our relationship. And
did you have an open thing or not?
No.
But he told you how to do it, so it seems like he was enticing you to do it.
No, he just was a whore. And so he was just showing me this thing.
He was showing you what he did.
Correct. What he had done or whatever.
But he didn't want you to do it.
I don't know. It's hard to know. He probably would have or did, but I was the jealous one. I was the one that was, my hypocrisy was laid bare when I was on there trying to hook up with other people, because we couldn't even walk down the street if he would say hello to somebody and I'd be like, "You had sex with him, didn't you?" And he's like, "Yeah, but it was like 3 years ago." And I would just flip out. I was insanely jealous. My self-esteem was non-existent. I was a real disaster. And so, that just didn't last. So I ran back to Florida with my tail between my legs. I finished college down there and then moved back to California with the plans and getting back together with Jeff, who I'm still friends with today. He lives here still. And
I hope you're getting miles in some way for all these trips.
It's a lot. Driving my Plymouth Horizon back and forth.
Yeah.
I had the saddest car that just made it back and forth across the country multiple times. And then when I got back to California, he basically said, we're not getting back together. And if you keep treating me, because I went right back to being weirdly jealous and moody. And he was like, you have to leave. Like, 'cause I was renting a room from him and he said, you have to go. You can't stay here. So I decided the best thing to do would be to get a meth dealer boyfriend to just take my mind completely off of Jeff.
Wow, that's a great idea.
Yeah, it was. It worked out really well too. It was, looking back, yeah, it was a fantastic plan. I don't know if I thought it through exactly that way, but it, like, the chain of events, that's what happened. I got rejected by Jeff. I was brokenhearted, and I was like, it's time to party. I'm done with school. I'm not doing anything. And yeah, I got involved with someone who was one of the preeminent Palm Springs drug dealers at the time. He was someone that was...
Are they still around now?
No, he's passed away.
From meth or what?
The last time I talked with him, he had just lost a lung due to his meth use.
Oh.
That was years ago. But I didn't know this shortly before I met him, he had embezzled, if I have the story right, like hundreds of thousands of dollars from DAP. He had worked there as the financial controller.
Oh, wow.
Had embezzled a ton of money. And then, of course, was laid off, and there were, court cases and all that about that. I didn't know any of that. Not that it probably would have mattered because he was offering me free drugs. So I was like a moth to a flame, really.
Right.
And spent the next couple of years hanging out with him and just spiraling into a absolute disaster. And he also dealt GHB, so I was back together with the love of my life, really, doing G and meth and just being an absolute waste. My last job during that time, I worked for, are you familiar with that old early bareback porn company called Hot Desert Nights? And they were around, and they were, for the time, I think they were considered trailblazing during the era of, or I guess towards the end of the era of condom sex in videos. And I worked for them as a graphic artist, tweaked out of my mind, just sitting there making these DVD and VHS.
Like the covers and all that stuff.
Exactly. They caught on that I was a mess and let me go. And then things just spiraled out of control. And
Oh, wait, did you get free samples?
of their videos? Yeah.
No, the guys.
Oh, no. Plus I was such a mess. I don't
Right.
know I don't know if any of the free samples would have wanted to
Gotcha.
have anything to do with.
All right.
I did work a couple of movies with them as like I worked the boom mic on one, and I worked like the sun reflector thing on
Right.
one of their videos. And
Right.
I remember on that one, I had probably been up for 4 days. And
Whoa.
we did this shoot. And so I was supposed to be guiding this sunlight into the dark crevices that they were trying to film or whatever. And I remember I was so out of it and not being able to see really or focus on, I had no idea what I was doing. And it was such a terrible experience. I was just thinking, hurry up, guys, let's just make this happen.
Just
I'm
do
about
it.
to fall over dead. Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, so not the most glamorous experience for me. And
Are they still around?
they are not. And I don't know, at least as far as I know, they are not. But they were around for a while, and I think became a big deal, at least locally.
Many of them bit the dust because of OnlyFans and stuff now. The
Right.
middleman's cut out.
Of
So,
course. Which makes sense.
Yeah.
So, at the end of it all, I was a real disaster. This is in 2003. My drug dealer boyfriend was in prison. I used to go visit him, and we would spend the whole visit him comforting me. He was an older guy. At that point, he was probably 58 or 59.
And how old were you?
And I was 27.
Okay.
So anyway, he had been involved in 12-step before he had gone through this period of his life. And I remember at one point he was like, you might want to check out a meeting or something. And I did. I checked one out and wasn't really interested. And things just continued to get worse and worse. And now I didn't have free drugs or a job. So I was like just basically going wherever I could get whatever I could get. And my roommate, the boyfriend, the ex that I had tried to get back together with, he and I were still roommates. And he basically said, if you don't do something, you can't stay here anymore. You have to go. And I had a dog at the time, Loosey Goosey, and he told me that he would, if I would go to rehab, he said, I'll take care of her. You don't have to worry about her at all. And that was, for whatever reason, that was the thing that made me go, okay, I'll try this thing. So I went to rehab, this place called the Ranch over in Desert Hot Springs.
Right.
And
I drive by it. There's some abandoned buildings on the dirt road past it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've named it the Ruins.
Oh,
It's like,
that's up by,
oh yeah, it's right. It's about a half a mile on the dirt road, and it's full of graffiti that's always changing, which is very interesting, and bullet holes.
yeah, I had no idea.
They shoot mortars out there at these buildings.
Yeah, I think you showed me some of the
yeah.
photos you've taken out there, but I didn't realize
that's right
the
past the ranch. Yeah. Of course, when you turn into that, you're thinking you're going into their driveway almost.
Right.
Because it's set up.
You must just have to go
Then
basically
you just
straight past it.
Zigzag and keep going.
Wow, that's hilarious. Yeah, I probably saw you driving by it. So, but no, that was way back in 03
Yeah.
when I went there. But and then
So did that work?
it did work. Yeah, it worked for me. I threw myself into it, and I think about 1 or 2 weeks. I can't really remember. I just remember, and one of the reasons I went to rehab was because I wasn't employed, and I kept applying for jobs, and there's nothing wrong with these jobs, but they were like Blockbuster Video and Kentucky Fried Chicken, and all of them gave drug tests. And I was like, there's no way I can pass a drug test. So I had this thought that if I go to rehab, get clean, especially weed, which stays in your system a really long time, I was like, I can come out of there, go get a job, pass a drug test, and then I can just go right back to like smoking weed. I didn't want to keep doing meth, but I thought I would always smoke weed the rest of my life, because I think weed and GHB were my true loves, but weed was just always there. I don't look down on those that use it either, just as a disclaimer. My husband smokes regularly. But anyway, I just had this thought about 2 weeks in that it was like, if you don't give yourself to this 100%, you're going to end up right back where you were. And things had gotten really bad. I left this a little bit out, but when I was down in Florida, I tested positive for HIV. I guess that was actually Valentine's Day of 2000 was the day that I found out that, which I'm grateful it was on like some sort of silly symbolic holiday, because otherwise I'm terrible with dates. I would never remember, but that one I'm able to remember, so I can mark it.
And you had no clue?
I thought when I went to get tested down in Florida, the glands, I had a couple of glands on my body that had gotten really big and had been big for months. And like I was wearing one of them was in my neck. And so I was always wearing polo shirts and stuff disguised.
Cover it. Yeah.
Because they were pretty big. When I went in to get tested, it was on the campus at the University of South Florida. And I said, I think I might have HIV. And they were like, oh no, don't worry about that. You're just tripping. And I wanted to say, you have no idea where I've been. Because
yeah.
Anyway,
and then they said, oh, you're right.
Yeah. When I went back for the results, they were like, you're right. And it's been okay. Every boyfriend I've ever had was HIV positive. And it's strange as a sort of a side piece. But when I went to Amsterdam, right before I joined the military, I went and spent 2 weeks by myself in Amsterdam. And I remember hearing that it was a thuggish place and dangerous or whatever. And about on my third or fourth day there, I got mugged at knife point, and my train tickets and my money were taken from me. And something weird happened after that experience. It was like, I felt, okay, that's over. I can relax now. It was like up to that point, I had been nervous that something bad was going to happen. And then I got mugged and I totally relaxed and ended up having a blast in Amsterdam. Wow. And something similar sort of happened with my HIV status. It was very weird. It was like, because
so now HIV, you know, and that's checked off the list.
Yeah. HIV hit the scene while I was still in high school. I remember watching the Channel 1 presentation about Magic Johnson coming out and saying that he was HIV positive. So it's my entire sexual life, the specter of HIV has always been there. I'm just of that age group. And once I found out that I was HIV positive, in a weird way, there was like okay, that's over. I can move forward. It's weird. I don't know what that makes me, but.
So you're doing okay with that now? You're on meds and stuff?
Yeah, and have been from the beginning. I'm German, so I'm really uptight about taking everything right on time, exactly as indicated. So I'm super med adherent. And so only in the last days of my meth use did my numbers start to crawl up and, I was detectable and things like that. But anyway, so I got clean in '03 and yeah, I've stayed clean since. And that's the end of my whole story. There's no stories after
The end. Okay. Thank you for coming in.
Yep, things just got really boring. Now I sit around and do nothing.
Where did you meet your husband? You left that out.
My husband?
Yeah.
We met at Slammer, which is a sex club in Los Angeles. I like sex. I've got a high sex drive, and I like sex clubs. Anyway, I went out there the night of my 40th birthday. I had dinner with some friends, and we went to the Eagle in Los Angeles. I don't really like bars, but they were like, let's go out. It's your birthday. Like, you just turned 40. So I went to the Eagle, and then I was like, this sucks. So I left and went to Slammer. I hooked up super briefly.
Is that like a bathhouse or something? Or
It's a sex club.
okay.
Yeah, it's like a bathhouse without any water features. So, or locking rooms. It doesn't have, you can't get a room and go away to that room.
Is this a gay
all night.
thing or is it a co-ed?
No, it's a gay thing.
That's
for
what
sure.
you're saying.
It's extremely gay. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, there's a big sign that says, gay activity happens here. If that makes you uncomfortable, do not enter. Whatever.
Wow.
So we hooked up very briefly there. I had
Wait,
just
so they're doing like bingo and drag and stuff like that?
maybe on other night. The night I was there, they weren't doing the
they
bingo
weren't
drag.
doing that.
But they probably do, quite honestly. I hooked up with him
Decorating class.
really quickly. Yeah. That's in our DNA. Come on. I'm kidding.
So that's where you met him?
Yeah, he blew me super briefly through a glory hole. I had just gotten there and I was like, I just paid $16. I don't want to
leave already.
So we went our separate ways. And then like a week and a half or 2 weeks later, I was on Scruff and I saw someone that looked like him. And I messaged him. I was like, hey, I hope this doesn't offend you, but do you ever go to a club called Slammer here? And he just responded, I frequent Slammer. I was like, oh, I think we hooked up. And anyway, we just started hanging out occasionally. It was funny. Neither of us had any romantic interest in the other in any way. It was the complete opposite of a love at first sight sort of a thing. But after hanging out like 4 or 5 times, at one point, he invited me to go to the gay night at Magic Mountain in Ventura. And it was funny. It just, both of us that night realized we were like, hey, we like each other. Like maybe we should make this sort of like a thing and hang out, and just grew from there. And he's the best. I've got a really kind husband. He puts up with a lot for me. Anyway, so that's where we met.
Did you ever tell him that when he helped you out the first time you met, that it wasn't worth $16?
Oh, I definitely told him that. He gives me shit about that all the time. He's just, geez. Yeah. Oh no, I didn't. But the way I frame it is, you were so good, it would have ended my night so quickly. So I had to
keep going.
I had to move away. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And what is his first name?
Mike.
Of course it is.
Mike's a good dude.
50% of gay men are named Mike.
Yeah, he's part of that 50%.
Yeah.
But for I think it was like our 3rd or 4th anniversary, I bought him this really tacky pillow from one of those companies, like the company that used to have products in airplanes, and you would look through, and it was almost a sharper image sort of a thing.
Right. Yeah.
So I found this really tacky throw pillow, and it says it all began, and then you can put, you can submit something and then a date. And so I got him this throw pillow, and it says it all began Slammer, July 26th, 14. Anyway. So
I thought you were going to say BJ on there. And I wondered if they would print that.
DJ at Slammer.
Yeah, there you go. All right. So what have you learned in your life? What lessons have you learned that mark who you are?
Oh, man. The biggest one that I struggle with constantly still, so I can't really say I've learned it, but it's something that I know if I'm being logical and not emotional. Biggest thing that I've learned and try to remember is to be kind to myself, to be patient with myself. I've really beat up on myself about almost everything, but particularly mistakes or perceived mistakes or flaws in my moral character. Because of my background in the church, there's always been this tug of war between the way I was raised to think, which is that everything is wrong, everything fun or enjoyable is sin. And so I've got this guilty conscience that sort of springs into action at the drop of a hat. And so I continue to try to learn to just be kind with myself, to learn that a little sarcasm and cynicism can go a long way for helping me to deal with sort of the trials and tribulations of everyday life. And I've also learned I have to be careful that those don't take over, because I can get really cynical and really sarcastic. An old friend of mine who was actually a sponsor of mine in 12-step stuff, at one point, he was about that. He was like, just use your powers for good and not evil. You can be really funny and you can be cynical and sarcastic, but in a way that's not cutting,
not hurtful, yeah.
Or that's always, you don't want to be a Debbie Downer all the time. But sometimes life can lend itself to viewing everything through that lens, and it can get pretty dark. But yeah, as far as things I've learned, I don't know, man.
I think that's good.
I'm a slow learner, really slow.
We've had some interesting experiences.
Yeah. I'll tell you one last story, only because it might be interesting to you.
All right.
About a couple years ago, I tried my hand briefly in the adult film industry.
Oh, really?
Very briefly. And it was interesting because I was thinking about it, and this is probably around the time that I met you and we did like a photo shoot.
Right.
So I was curious about expressing myself, and I'm not ashamed of anyone seeing that. Or I did 3 scenes. So I'm not worried or ashamed about any of that. At the time I spoke with my husband, Mike, about it, and I was like, hey, what would you think about this? I'm curious about it. And he was totally like, go for it. If you're interested in it, do it. He was totally supportive of it. So I did 2 scenes for a studio and then 1 scene with an OnlyFans guy. And the one that I did with the OnlyFans guy was enjoyable, but the 2 scenes that I did with the studio were a terrible experience for me. Terrible. And it wasn't because of anything anyone did. Everyone was nice. Everyone was professional. The whole experience theoretically could have been just fine, but I was not into it at all. Even in my worst tweak days, even in the worst depths of my tweak days, I never had an issue getting a hard on, ever. And this was the first experience in my life where I couldn't get a hard on, and it really threw me for a loop. And yeah, I just couldn't get into it. The whole
it's hard doing stuff on demand, and it's pretty boring, actually. I've let some studios shoot a couple things here. One guy asked me, after 8 days of shooting here, this is pre-COVID, what'd you think? In one word, I said mechanical. It was just so boring.
Yeah, I couldn't. It was not what I thought it would be, and I'm sure that's everyone's experience who does porn for the first time. You think it's just going to be, just pounding and just, sweat and grunting, and really it's, oh shit, the white balance on the second camera is off. Okay, stop. We got to, where's the white balance? And the lighting, wait a minute, we need to relight this. It's not quite, it was a lot of that. And I know that's what has to be done to put together a professional product, but I couldn't do it. I did 2 scenes, and the only reason I did a second one is because they had me, when I signed up to do it, they said, will you do 2 scenes? And I said, yes. Otherwise, I wouldn't have even done the second one.
Wow.
And so, yeah, that if you ever see me on video, don't look too closely. You'll see tears in my eyes and a frown on my face. It's not hot unless you're into this.
Wow. You guys think it's so different than it is. It's like I hear, if you ever shoot this or that, I want to be the fluffer. There are no fluffers.
No.
They watch stuff on their phone. That's what they do. Yeah. And they shoot up with Trimix.
Correct. It's like you fluff yourself, get it done. Come on, where's the money shot? Everyone be quiet. I'm trying to focus. It just was, it was so stressful.
Yeah.
It was, oof. And it's funny because people have come up to me and said, oh, we saw you in this thing. That was really hot. Oh, man. Wow. And I was like, really? Is that how it translates? They must have done like they say, they fixed it in post. Anyway.
All right, sir.
Well,
Danielle,
cool.
It's been fun.
Thanks, man. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming in. Okay. Have a great day.
Bye.